2 dribbles from just past half court. No hesitation, no glance at the clock, no second guessing whether this was the right moment or the wrong shot. The ball left her hands from a place most players wouldn't even consider, spinning cleanly through the air like it had done 1,000 times before. And the instant it dropped straight through the net, the sound inside the gym changed completely. Not just louder, but different. The kind of eruption that feels less like celebration and more like relief, as if everyone watching had been holding their breath without even realizing it. Because that shot wasn't just a deep 3, it was an answer. For months, the noise around Caitlin Clark hadn't gone away. It had followed her from empty rehab rooms to quiet training sessions, from missed games to endless debates online. People didn't just wonder if she'd come back healthy. They questioned whether the league had already adjusted to her, whether her body could handle the grind, whether that fearless confidence everyone fell in love with would still be there when it mattered most. Doubt has a way of growing louder when an athlete can't respond on the court. And for the first time in her career, Clark had been forced to sit with that doubt instead of silencing it. That's what made this moment different. This wasn't a packed arena with spotlights and national broadcasts. It was a practice gym. Coaches lining the sidelines with clipboards, teammates watching closely, trying not to stare. A setting where reputations don't matter nearly as much as readiness. And when that shot went in, something shifted immediately. Players popped up from the bench. Coaches who had been stone-faced a second earlier started clapping without thinking about it. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Whatever questions still lingered didn't vanish entirely, but they suddenly felt a lot smaller. What most people don't realize is how much pressure was sitting on this one sequence. This wasn't just about shaking off rust or proving she could still shoot from the logo. It was about re-establishing trust. Trust from coaches who needed to know they could build around her again. Trust from teammates who wanted to feel stability on the floor. And maybe most importantly, trust from herself after a stretch where her body refused to cooperate no matter how hard she worked. One shot can't rebuild all of that on its own, but it can open the door. And that's exactly what this one did. While that gym buzzed with renewed belief, a very different energy was reportedly building elsewhere in the same camp. This is where the story starts to split and where the conversation gets uncomfortable for some people. Because while Clark was quietly letting her game speak again, there was growing online chatter suggesting that Angel Reese wasn't exactly thrilled with how her role was unfolding. Nothing officially announced, no direct quotes on record, just reports, whispers, and speculation spreading the way they always do when expectations meet reality at the highest level. And that contrast is impossible to ignore. One player coming off a season derailed by injuries, saying all the right things, doing all the unseen work, and earning everything in real time. Another, according to reports, struggling with the idea that making the roster didn't automatically guarantee the spotlight. Whether every detail of those rumors is accurate or not almost doesn't matter. What matters is what the moment represents. Team USA isn't built on hype. It's built on hierarchy, sacrifice, and understanding that no role is promised, no matter how big your name is. That's the part of the story most highlight clips won't tell you. They'll show the swish, they'll show the reaction, they'll repost the shot 100 times with captions about comebacks and greatness, but they won't show the months of silence before it. They won't show how much restraint it takes for a player used to dominating headlines to re-enter a room where nothing is guaranteed. And they won't explain why this one practice shot ended up exposing a much bigger divide inside the camp. Because this was never just about basketball skill, it was about mindset, about who shows up ready to earn everything again, and who struggles with being asked to wait. That logo 3 didn't just announce that Clark was healthy, it quietly drew a line between two very different approaches to opportunity. And once that line appeared, everything that followed made a lot more sense. But that shot was only the beginning. What happened next is where the real story starts to unfold. Most people remember the records, the sold-out arenas, the logo threes that turned casual viewers into nightly fans. What quietly disappears from the conversation is the season that came after all of that. The one that didn't produce viral clips. The one that didn't come with trophies or streaks. The season that forced Caitlin Clark to learn patience the hard way. It started with optimism and momentum, and then it unraveled piece by piece. One injury turned into another, a quad issue lingered, groin problems surfaced on both sides, an ankle added itself to the list. Before long, the injury report looked longer than her stat lines. 13 games, that was it. 13 appearances in an entire season for a player who had just rewritten record books months earlier. For someone whose identity had always been tied to competing, to rhythm, to constant movement, that absence felt louder than any missed shot ever could.
There's a unique kind of frustration that comes with watching from the bench when your mind is ready but your body won't cooperate. Practices still happen, games still tip off, teammates still grind every night, and you're there, dressed, present, but powerless to change anything on the floor. That silence doesn't make headlines, but it eats at athletes in ways fans rarely consider. Especially for someone used to carrying responsibility, being reduced to encouragement and claps becomes its own form of torture. That's where the whispers started. Quiet at first, then louder. People wondered if the physical toll of her style had finally caught up to her. Some asked whether defenders had figured her out, whether the league had adjusted and her body simply couldn't keep up anymore. Others hinted that maybe the rookie season was the peak. Nobody said it outright, but the question hovered everywhere she went. Would she ever look the same again? What makes that stretch even more overlooked is how little of it played out in public. There were no dramatic interviews, no emotional posts documenting setbacks, just rehab sessions early in the morning, physical therapy when no cameras were rolling, rebuilding strength without knowing exactly when the next opportunity would come. That kind of work doesn't trend online. It doesn't come with applause, but it's where careers are either preserved or quietly slip away. Instead of disappearing, she stayed visible in the ways that actually mattered, traveling with the team, sitting through film sessions, supporting teammates dealing with their own bumps and setbacks, learning how the game looks when you're not the one controlling it. That perspective changes players, whether they want it to or not. It forces you to see angles you miss when you're always the focal point. It teaches empathy, and it tests whether your connection to the game goes deeper than personal success. The hardest part wasn't the physical pain, it was the waiting. Knowing you could still help, still create, still compete, but being told the smartest thing you could do was nothing at all. 10 bad games, she would later say, would have been worth it just to be out there. That single sentence reveals more than any highlight reel ever could. It wasn't about stats or validation. It was about belonging on the floor again. By the time the season quietly ended, the narrative around her had shifted in subtle but dangerous ways. Not openly negative, just uncertain. And uncertainty is the most uncomfortable place for a superstar to live. It leaves room for speculation. It invites comparisons. It opens the door for people to assume something was lost along the way. What nobody could see yet was that this season didn't take anything from her. It sharpened something instead. And when she finally stepped back into that Team USA gym, she wasn't just returning from injury. She was returning with a different edge, shaped by everything she'd been forced to endure without an audience. And that's exactly why what happened next caught so many people off guard. Before a single scrimmage tipped off, before anyone even bothered to speculate about lineups or minutes, there was a quiet internal verdict already taking shape inside Team USA's walls. It didn't come from social media, it didn't come from highlight culture or fan debates. It came from people who have seen every version of pressure this sport can create and know exactly what to look for when it matters. That's why when Sue Bird said Caitlin Clark was 100% healthy heading into camp, it wasn't filler or optimism. Sue Bird doesn't deal in soft language. She doesn't hype for the sake of hype. When she says something like that, it's usually because she's already seen enough to feel confident putting her name behind it. Not 90%, not easing back, 100. That distinction mattered more than people realized at the time. Clark's own words backed it up almost immediately. She didn't walk into her first press conference acting like a savior or pretending the past season didn't happen. She acknowledged reality without flinching. Healthy, yes. Perfectly conditioned? Not yet. Rust to shake off, wind to get back. That kind of honesty is rare from players with massive expectations attached to them. It signals someone who understands the process and isn't afraid to earn their way back through it. What Team USA saw wasn't desperation. It wasn't someone trying to force moments to prove she still belonged. It was a player comfortable enough to admit where she was without losing sight of where she was going. That balance is hard to teach and almost impossible to fake. Coaches notice it immediately. So do veterans who have lived through their own peaks and valleys.
There was also something else happening beneath the surface. Clark didn't arrive treating camp like a comeback tour. She listened. She asked questions. She integrated herself into drills instead of trying to dominate them. Those details matter in a setting like this, where chemistry and trust weigh just as heavily as raw talent. Team USA doesn't reward volume shooters who need the ball to feel relevant. It rewards players who can fit, adapt, and elevate everyone else without demanding attention. From the outside, it might have looked like caution. Inside the gym, it looked like control. Coaches don't rush judgments in environments like this, but they do start building mental files early. Who communicates naturally? Who stays engaged between reps? Who absorbs instruction without ego? Long before the logo 3 ever splashed through the net, Clark was already checking those boxes. The irony is that most fans assumed Team USA would need time to be convinced, that Clark would have to prove everything all over again. In reality, the people who see the game the clearest didn't need much convincing at all. Health was the only real question. Once that was answered, everything else became about timing. And timing, as it turned out, was perfect. Because knowing someone is healthy is one thing, seeing how they respond when the spotlight turns back on is something else entirely. Team USA had seen enough to be optimistic. The gym was about to show whether optimism would turn into certainty. The gym didn't feel loud when the scrimmage started. It felt heavy, the kind of quiet that settles in when everyone knows evaluations are happening in real time. Coaches lined the sideline with arms folded. Teammates exchanged short glances instead of words. This wasn't a practice to get shots up. It was a test, and everyone in the building understood exactly who the eyes were on. When Caitlin Clark first stepped onto the floor, she didn't force anything. No heat checks, no long pull-ups, just simple reads and clean passes, like someone feeling the rhythm of the room before deciding how much to give. A drive, a kick-out, solid defense, smart movement. It was controlled, almost restrained. To the untrained eye, it might have looked underwhelming. To coaches, it looked intentional. You could sense a few people wondering if this was it, if the injuries had taken just enough edge off to turn something electric into something ordinary. The ball moved around, other players created, Clark stayed within the flow. That doubt didn't say much, but it hung there anyway, lingering in the silence between possessions. Then it happened. She crossed half court with 2 calm dribbles, no rush, no signal. The defender hesitated for half a second. That was all it took. From a spot that would get most players benched for even thinking about it, she rose up and let it fly. The release was clean, the arc was familiar, and the second the ball snapped through the net without touching iron, the gym reacted before anyone could stop themselves. Benches popped. A few coaches clapped instinctively, then quickly tried to play it cool. Teammates laughed and shook their heads the way players do when something unfair just happened. The silence shattered, replaced by that low buzz that spreads when people realize they've just witnessed a turning point. Not because of the difficulty of the shot, but because of what it represented. That was the moment the question stopped being hypothetical. You don't need a box score to understand what that shot did. It told the room she trusted her body again. It told defenders they couldn't relax anywhere near her. And it told the staff that whatever caution they'd planned was about to become a conversation instead. A shot like that doesn't just score points, it changes posture. Practice pace shifts, energy sharpens. Suddenly, everyone is moving a little faster. What made it even louder was the reaction from the sideline. Sue Bird didn't jump or cheer. She smiled, a small nod, like someone seeing a familiar chapter pick up exactly where it left off. That look mattered. Legends don't get impressed easily.
They recognized patterns, and Bird had seen this one before. The play after the shot told a real story. Clark didn't hunt another deep three. She zipped a pass through traffic for an easy bucket. Next possession, she jumped a passing lane and disrupted the break. No celebration, no flex, just execution. The kind of response that separates a highlight from a statement. From that point on, the gym belonged to her presence, even when the ball didn't. Teammates cut harder, spacing tightened, passes got sharper. The scrimmage didn't revolve around her, but it clearly moved with her. The rust she'd mentioned earlier didn't show up. Whatever hesitation people expected never arrived.
Missing a shot here or there didn't change anything. Each miss came with a quick shake of the head and immediate focus on the next possession. No visible frustration, just urgency. The competitive fire that defined her eyes wasn't gone. It had been waiting. That's when it became clear this wasn't about proving she could still play. That was already settled. This was about whether she could lead the room without saying a word. And with one shot from a place most players wouldn't dare, followed by everything that came after, she answered that too. But the ripple effect of that moment didn't stop there, because while one player was quietly taking control, not everyone was reacting the same way to how the day was unfolding. Once the noise settled, something more subtle took over the gym. The kind of shift you don't catch in highlights, but coaches track possession by possession. Caitlin Clark didn't raise her voice. She didn't huddle teammates up or demand the ball. She simply played in a way that organized everyone else around her. Her passes started arriving a half-second earlier than defenders expected. Cutters found space without calling for it. Shooters didn't need to reset their feet. It felt like the floor widened every time she initiated the offense. That's not something that shows up immediately on a stat sheet, but it's exactly the kind of control staff notices when they're deciding who can run a group under pressure. On the defensive end, the tone shifted too. She anticipated rotations, jumped lanes, and turned small reads into momentum plays. Not with highlight blocks or steals meant for attention, but with positioning that made life easier for everyone else. Players fed off it instinctively. Defense tightened. Communication improved, effort followed presence. That's how leadership often looks at this level. Quiet, contagious, unavoidable. What stood out most was what she didn't do. She didn't rush shots to remind anyone who she was. She didn't chase moments. Even after the logo 3, there was no visible flex, no glance toward the sideline. She trusted that the work would speak long enough on its own. That restraint is hard for any star, especially one still reclaiming her rhythm. The chemistry that reappeared surprised some people, but it shouldn't have. Clark slid naturally into actions with teammates she'd known for years, including Cameron Brink, with whom she shared a familiarity that goes back nearly a decade. Timing returned instantly. Eye contact replaced verbal cues. That kind of connection doesn't disappear during injury. It waits. From the sideline, conversations started to change. Clips turned into discussions. Observations turned into possibilities. You could see Sue Bird lean in toward the coaching staff, gestures animated now, energy unmistakable. This wasn't about whether Clark could contribute. It was about what kind of role made the most sense if the goal was winning now and building forward. Head coach Cheryl Reeve watched closely as Clark worked alongside different backcourt partners, adjusting without friction. There were no forced rhythms, no hesitation. Every lineup looked functional. More than that, it looked comfortable. That's a rare quality when mixing elite talent with egos and expectations. Even when shots didn't fall during drills, nothing changed. Clark muttered to herself, reset, and sprinted back. No lingering frustration, no visible doubt, just urgency, the kind that lifts practice intensity without needing a speech. Teammates responded to it almost unconsciously, matching her pace, sharpening their own execution. By the end of practice, it was clear she wasn't just blending in, she was stabilizing everything around her. Coaches value that more than flash, especially in international play where cohesion beats talent every time. This wasn't dominance in the loud sense, it was command. And once leadership establishes itself like that, decisions stop being emotional, they become practical.
Because while some players measure opportunity by minutes and status, others understand it by responsibility. Not everyone in the gym was processing that reality the same way, and as one player's influence became undeniable, another tension was quietly beginning to surface. What didn't show up on the practice film was the tension people started whispering about afterward, not during drills, not in huddles, but in the spaces where evaluations don't feel as structured and expectations start clashing with reality. According to reports that circulated online during and after camp, not everyone was processing their role the same way as the picture became clearer.
Several outlets and insiders claimed there was growing frustration from Angel Reese over her spot in the rotation. Nothing official, no press conference blow-ups, no statements on record, just what's been described as behind-the-scenes dissatisfaction with a bench role she reportedly didn't expect. It's important to be clear here. This is all unverified reporting and speculation, but the conversation picked up enough steam that it became hard to ignore. From the outside, making Team USA alone feels like validation. In reality, it's just the first step. Minutes aren't guaranteed, roles are earned. And on a roster loaded with elite scorers, defenders, and veterans who have already proven they can sacrifice for gold medals, every possession is earned the hard way. Reports suggest Reese struggled with that adjustment, especially as Clark's comeback storyline gained momentum inside the gym. Timing played a huge role. While Clark was being evaluated through the lens of chemistry, pacing, and leadership, Reese was stepping into an environment where her usual strengths weren't being spotlighted in the same way. At the international level, effort alone isn't enough. Rebounding and physicality matter, but so does fitting into a system without disrupting it. That's where the disconnect reportedly started. Some reports claimed Reese felt overshadowed as attention shifted toward Clark's performance and influence. Again, nothing confirmed, but the contrast didn't help perceptions. One player keeping her head down, blending into lineups and expanding her impact quietly. Another, according to speculation, wrestling with the idea that contribution didn't automatically equal prominence. Whether fair or not, that narrative spread quickly. Situations like this tend to snowball. A comment gets overheard, body language gets misread, frustration gets interpreted as chemistry issues. Coaches are especially sensitive to it, not because disagreement is forbidden, but because international competition leaves no room for distractions. Even the perception of divided focus can force decisions. What made the tension feel sharper was how different the responses appeared. Clark spoke publicly about compromise and understanding team needs. Reports suggested Reese was more focused on clarifying her role in minutes. Neither approach is inherently wrong, but in a setting built around collective sacrifice, one is far easier for staff to rally around. Teammates, according to those same reports, noticed the difference, not in dramatic confrontations, but in where energy was directed. One player investing in cohesion, another reportedly invested in status. That's often all it takes for coaching staffs to decide which voice carries weight when pressure hits. To be fair, frustration in elite environments isn't unusual. Competitors expect to compete. The issue isn't feeling disappointed, it's how that disappointment is handled. And the reports coming out of camp suggested that this moment became a quiet turning point. Not because of one conversation or incident, but because it highlighted a philosophical gap between players adapting to circumstance and players resisting it. By the time evaluations wrapped up, the pieces were already in place. Coaches didn't just have game tape, they had context. And when the lineup decisions became official, they reflected more than on-court ability. They reflected trust, alignment, and readiness to serve a role bigger than individual expectations. And once those decisions were made public, the reasoning behind them started to become a lot clearer. By the time the coaching staff finalized decisions, it wasn't dramatic, it wasn't controversial inside the room, it was methodical. What looked sudden to the outside world had been building quietly with every rep, every interaction, every response to pressure. Coaches didn't just ask who could score, they asked who could stabilize the floor when things got messy, who elevated others without demanding control, and who understood that Team USA is built on trust before talent. From that perspective, the choice surrounding Caitlin Clark became obvious.
Her case wasn't built on one logo three or a handful of clean possessions. It was built on consistency. How she entered camp, how she spoke about her conditioning, how she integrated instead of imposing. The staff saw a player who didn't assume anything was hers, even after everything she'd already accomplished. That matters more than fans realize. Coaches repeatedly emphasized basketball IQ when discussing internal evaluations. Clark read the game a step ahead, adjusted without friction, and made lineups work regardless of who was next to her. That adaptability is gold in international play, where unfamiliar styles, officiating, and pacing can disrupt even elite teams. She didn't need to be the loudest voice. Her decisions did the talking.
Another factor weighed heavily: reliability under strain. Clark's injury season gave the staff something rare: evidence of character without minutes attached. She didn't disappear when sidelined. She stayed engaged. She traveled. She supported teammates dealing with their own issues. According to people close to the program, that behavior stood out long before she touched the court at camp. It showed who she was when nothing was being asked of her publicly. Head coach Cheryl Reeve consistently values players who make the group better, even when they're not the focal point. During scrimmages, Clark did exactly that. Backcourts flowed, spacing improved, defensive communication sharpened. Those are coaching tells. When a team functions more smoothly with someone on the floor, that player earns responsibility fast. Contrast that with how the staff reportedly viewed frustration surfacing elsewhere, not as a personal flaw, but as a risk. International tournaments leave no margin for entitlement, confusion, or distractions. If a player struggles to accept a role in camp, it raises questions about how they'll handle tighter rotations, harsher whistles, and unfamiliar environments. Coaches don't wait for those questions to answer themselves on a world stage. That's why starting roles weren't treated as rewards, they were treated as assignments. Who could be trusted to manage tempo? Who could absorb pressure without unraveling chemistry? Who embraced responsibility instead of chasing recognition? In that framework, Clark wasn't elevated, she was selected. Players like Sue Bird understood it immediately. Leadership isn't about resume, it's about alignment. Clark aligned with the program's values without being asked to. Others, according to reports, struggled to recalibrate expectations within a crowded, veteran-heavy system. This wasn't about punishing anyone, it was about clarity. The staff needed players who viewed a starting spot as a duty, not a statement, who saw minutes as something earned daily, not assumed based on reputation. Clark's approach made those decisions easier because it removed ego from the equation. By the time the lineup choices were announced, they didn't represent favoritism or hype. They reflected a philosophy Team USA has relied on for decades. Selflessness scales, entitlement fractures. One player embodied that lesson in real time. And once that became clear, the future direction of the program followed naturally. Because when coaches choose leaders, they're not just picking for today. They're choosing who can carry the weight of what comes next. What happened at this camp was never just about a depth chart or a practice highlight. It was a glimpse into how the future of Team USA is being shaped and what the program values when the margin for error disappears. Beneath the noise, the takes, and the online arguments, one truth emerged clearly. Talent gets you invited, but alignment earns you responsibility. For Caitlin Clark, this wasn't a comeback tour, it was a reset, a chance to show that leadership doesn't start when your name is announced, it starts when nothing is promised. She didn't demand trust, she built it possession by possession, reaction by reaction, long before lineups became public. That approach didn't just secure a role, it positioned her as a pillar for what comes next.
For others, including Angel Reese, the moment became a crossroads. Not because of one camp or one role, but because elite environments eventually strip things down to fundamentals. How you respond when you're not featured says more than how you perform when you are. According to reports, that adjustment wasn't seamless for everyone, and Team USA has never been patient with players who resist the system instead of adapting to it. Looking ahead to upcoming international tournaments, this camp will be remembered less for a Logo 3 and more for what followed it. The realization that the next era won't be handed down through reputation or marketability. It will be built around players who understand sacrifice, spacing, accountability, and emotional control. Players who raise the floor, not just the ceiling. That's why this moment matters. Not because it crowns a star, but because it clarifies a direction. Team USA isn't chasing headlines, it's reinforcing a standard. And the players who thrive moving forward will be the ones who embrace that standard without needing it explained. So when people look back on this stretch, they won't see it as a debate over minutes or starting spots. They'll see it as the moment the program quietly identified who it could trust when the lights get brightest and the pressure is unavoidable. One player showed she was ready to carry that weight again. Others were reminded that opportunity at this level doesn't bend, it demands. And that understanding may end up shaping the next Olympic cycle more than any single shot ever could.